Since the publication of her book The Country Girls more than 50 years ago, Edna O'Brien has been one of our most acclaimed writers. Her work examines everything from women's lives and relationships to class and Irish identity, and more recently, what has happened to Ireland. Now Edna has written The Country Girls for the stage, and it premieres in the Gaiety, starting on Monday, November the 7th, running through to the 12th of November, and then in the Garter Lane Theatre in Waterford from the 14th of November to Saturday.
No, it's the other way around.
Oh, it was there.
Starting tomorrow.
It's starting there tomorrow.
Tomorrow.
Sorry, it's starting in October. That's tomorrow. And then it's moving to the Gaiety. Sorry, I got that wrong. But anyway, Edna, good morning and welcome.
Hello.
Thank you for correcting me. I want to go back to Tuam Graney in County Clare, because you certainly didn't have the happiest of childhoods.
Well, utterly happy childhood is no one had. You hadn't either. I certainly didn't have a calm childhood, but I had a childhood that was full of a narrative, full of stories, some troubling, all the ingredients to make one a writer. Now, I didn't think that at that time. All these little setbacks and adversities helped me to make a writer, but I had a childhood that probably served me well, even if often I shed tears.
It became the raw material, effectively, of your early writing.
Well, it's the raw material, but it's to be a writer and to remain a writer, you have to have a sense of wonder. A wonder of looking at things always and as if for the first time. Otherwise you get stale. The landscape around Drewsborough at home was and remains in my mind, and when I still go there to visit my nephew and so on, was magical. And somehow nature played as strong a part, and I don't mean to be highfalutin when I say this. Nature played as strong a part in my childhood as did the people. Now, the people, the main person, I would say, the main in the dramatis persona, as we call it in the theatre now, and you must remind them it's tomorrow night, it's starting in Waterford.
I will do so before we finish.
Or I will get ticked off. My mother was the most important influence on my life and always will be. She was a very powerful woman whom, as I have often, maybe even to you, Pat, mentioned before, had an abhorrence of the written word. She had a feeling and a fear that the written word brought trouble. So although I was her pet as such, there was an unspoken and as yet unfought battle between us. My father was, like many Irishmen, it wasn't just my poor father who is dead, seemed a very not remote as much as frightening figure, and like many Irishmen would drink or get drunk. And that wasn't just him alone, it was lots of families.
But your family, I mean, your house, you mentioned that you had an avenue, but it was potholed. There were fields which were given away. It seems that in some way your father was falling from grace somehow.
Who doesn't fall from grace? I think it would be more correct to say he didn't, no more than his daughter Edna O'Brien has. He didn't have a money sense. He would not have fitted into the Celtic tiger, shall we say. I think he was cut out perhaps to be an actor. He loved singing, he loved performing, he loved telling the stories, and he had inherited this huge, beautiful place, Drewsborough, which had been owned by a family called Lord and Lady Drew, who I believed as a young person still haunted the place and the forts. And it was a lovely house, but cash was short. And we did have an avenue, so that, again, there was a contrast. There was the remnants of a bit of better life or grandeur or whatever word you want to use, and there was the reality.
The harsh reality. Your mother with buckets of this and buckets of that, working very hard.
She worked very hard. But, you know, in those times in the country in Ireland, agriculture and everything, there was nothing. They didn't have money to.
But she had different.
Lime the land, stock the land. They didn't.
But she had a different experience. She had been away.
she had been away in America, which was one thing, but I think character is very important, is as important as experience. Her character, which I hope she has dinned into me, was always to keep working, always to keep working. And that she did. And
but as a child, you could look in her wardrobe and find that dress, which was one of the remnants of her American experience. And I bet you wondered what might have been for her.
Oh, of course. I think every child goes around its house, whatever that house be, and invents a story. Sometimes a magic story, sometimes a scary story for the things in it. My mother's dresses they were in flitters, but they had reminiscence made up by me of dances and romance and all that, and objects. One object that struck me always as being very profound was a letter a priest wrote to my grandmother, my mother's mother. My mother's brother was a soldier, the Irish, and he was on the run with money on his head. He wasn't captured, but the day after the truce came, he was accidentally killed. And with fishing bombs, he and another soldier were fishing up near, and he wrote his mother, sons and their mothers, Irish mothers or something, and he wrote this letter which the priest copied out, and it was in the sideboard, along with china cups and saucers and in those days they had little slop bowls as well as sugar bowls and all that. So our house was full of, as I've said often, and indeed often written, and in this story that I have written of the country girls, all of that is there, but just touched on.
What was the prelude to your leaving that turbulent household?
Oh, I wanted to get away. Everyone that's young wants to get away.
And what was the resistance to you leaving?
Well, there wasn't a resistance because I was going to be a good girl, both a pharmacist and an optician. I attended lectures for both, worked in a pharmacy, and all the time I was thinking, I want to write, I want to be a writer. And I have this daft notion that if I met writers, somehow like Aladdin's lamp, that it would rub off me. And I would hear about Miles Nagopolin, Flann O'Brien. I would just, never in their company. And Patrick Kavanagh, they were the geniuses, and indeed they were the geniuses. James Joyce was dead, and Samuel Beckett was a blasphemer. He was called the blasphemer when he came home to give evidence in a lawsuit because he had written a book called Horoscope. So I knew about writers second hand, so to speak, or through hearsay. But I was writing in my own little secret way, little knowing that the very world I had escaped voluntarily and heartily would be the fount for my writing.
You married a writer, a man much older than you, and in a sense that did open the door, though, because you got to meet publishers and people who... I
did meet a publisher via my husband, but I wouldn't go so far, to tell you the truth, as to say that opened the door. You know what opened the door? What I wrote. There's no such thing as, you'll meet a publisher and somehow that'll get a book written. My own mania and perseverance and determination, that is what opened the door.
When you were commissioned to write a book, was The Country Girls kind of half-written? Or did you sit down and say, "Okay, let's have at it"?
No, I used to do readers' reports for a publisher and to get a guinea. That guinea was big sum. And I was a little over-precocious in my readers' reports, so much so that the editor wrote to me and said, did I ever write anything myself? And I said, yes, but it wasn't any good, which it wasn't. There were scattered little pieces. And what the deciding line between not being able to write and write happened with my separation from Ireland. that separation was huge. It was a separation from land, from family, from religion, from everything. It was a cut. I don't mean that I did away with all those things, but the separation, I knew that I had crossed the sea. And in the crossing of the sea, both emotionally and geographically, I found, and this is the truth, I found my voice. Now, every writer has her or his own voice. I found my voice not because I was looking for it, but because of circumstances. The circumstances made me think deeper into who I was, where I'd come from, and both the riches and the adversities that had formed me.
When the book was published, I mean, it was a
huge... A bit of furore, yes.
Yeah, it was a huge hit. But then, it's now seen as a badge of honour, but it was banned in Ireland.
Yes. So was everything, by the way. Everything was banned.
That's what I say. Looking back, it's a badge of honour. But how did your family react to the fact that...
Oh, very bad. The reaction at home was more acutely painful for me than to be banned. You see it in the paper, you're banned. It has a non-reality as such. It has a label or a caption. Yes, my mother took it very badly because she felt ashamed, and like many people, she felt and was told by neighbours, etc., that I had somehow ridiculed or shamed my own people and my own. And I said then, and I say it now, you cannot write a work of fiction or a drama. You can write